divorce is an issue in real estate. Anybody? Yeah, right? So just process.
But if you get the listing, you can get 3 deals.
You could potentially, and we're gonna definitely talk about that, the possibility of that and whether you actually want to do that. So. Our primary objectives today, to build a stronger understanding of the divorce space. The real intersection of family law, real estate and mortgage financing. And we're going to talk about some safeguards, and some things that you want to consider in the process, to protect yourselves against any possible litigation, malpractice, some things such as that. Just so you guys know, if you're taking notes, great. I'm going to send this presentation to you after the fact, okay? A little bit about myself. My name is Mark Meglio. I work for Primary Residential Mortgage here in Guilford, Connecticut on the Green. I've been in the mortgage business going on 6 years. I am a mortgage loan originator, just like you all deal with on a regular basis. But I've been certified as a certified divorce lending professional. There's a lot of nuances to the divorce mortgage planning process, guidelines, strategies, so on and so forth. And we'll touch a little bit upon that today, that I'm specialized in and that I've been trained in. I'm trained by the Divorce Lending Association out of Denver. I think they're in Denver right now. And I got my training in early 2001. I started the process at the end of 2019, and then COVID hit, and we all know what happened during those 2 years. So that kind of derailed me during the process. And I finalized my training in 2001, the beginning of 2001. And the reason I chose to get involved as a certified divorce lending professional, back in 2014, I went through a difficult divorce and ended up selling a house, renting a house for a little bit of time. That light is very bright, so that's what I'm moving. And then made some decisions, which I'm not too proud of. And little side note, ended up buying a house from Miss McHugh, or selling the house. Yes, it was her personal house. I didn't have anybody to guide me in the process. There was no one to talk to me about mortgage or any of the concerns and any of the considerations that I wanted to make while going through the process. And it felt very willy-nilly. And I made some bad financial decisions, which had I had somebody guiding me throughout the process, I would not have made. For instance, we sold the house in North Guilford, my ex-wife and I lost $40,000. Because we bought it in 2007, I sold it in 2013, the market was crap. No one talked to me about, hey, maybe we can figure out a way for you to keep the house, maybe we can, delay the sale of the house and maybe wait until the market comes back. So there was no conversation. It was an attorney, I'm going to get you everything you deserve, and we're going to fight it out, and that was it. So when I started in the mortgage business, a friend of mine said, you need to find your niche and you need to find the reason why you want to be in this business, whether it's FHA, USDA, VA, or in my case, divorce. So I set out on this path to educate myself. And I'm happy I did. Couple statistics about divorce. It's estimated. Hi, welcome. It's estimated to be almost a $12 billion industry, and these are some statistics from a little earlier in this decade. In 2020, there were over 60,000 family law businesses. Now, this is not attorneys, this is just family law businesses, and oftentimes in a family law practice, there are multiple attorneys. So it's a big business. Projected growth in 2021, in this case, was about 4%. In 2019, there were 2.8 divorces per 1,000 population. And over the next 7 years, it was projected that there's going to be an average of over 4%, 4 people per 1,000 population. And this is a projection over the next, 32 years. So it's not going away, right? Divorce is going to be around. I'm going to break down the numbers a little farther, and please forgive my PowerPoint skills here. You're going to see some things that are going to be a little jumbled. So it said that according to the CDC, there's 1 divorce every 13 seconds. 70% of all divorces involve real estate. This is where it gets fun. The US divorce rate is the 3rd highest in the world. Most Americans file for divorce between January and March. So we're right in the middle of the busiest time.
So I didn't miss the cutoff point then.
No, you did not. You got 1 more day. Back up top here. This 70% of divorces involving real estate equates to approximately $50,000 divorces involving real estate annually. About 1.1 million divorcing homeowners annually. So there's a lot of people going through this process, right? To put a different perspective on it, it takes 2 minutes on average for a couple to recite their wedding vows. And during that time, there are 9 divorce filings and approximately 1,300 divorce filings in a 5-hour wedding ceremony. So a little bit morbid though, right? You know.
Oh, that's sad.
According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 68% of an average American's wealth is tied up in their home equity. Senior divorces are some of the fastest growing divorces in the United States. I can't tell you how many divorcing seniors that I've been speaking to lately, and it's quite sad. These people that have been together for 30, 40, 50 years and decide that it's time for a divorce. It's kind of scary. I like using this image up here because it shows the 4 major pieces of the divorce puzzle on how they fit together: divorce law, our family law, real property, real estate, mortgage planning, and financial planning or tax planning. What's more important about this image is not how connected they are, but really how disconnected they are. And we see this a lot. It's the disconnect that usually causes the most problems for divorcing couples and divorcing homeowners. This image here shows how connected things really are and how connected all the 4 pieces of the puzzle are really tied into the home. And you can see how important the house really becomes. It's not just as simple as one spouse retaining the house or just simply selling it. There's a lot more involved in the process: tax consideration, retirement possibilities, marital property and separate property, and then support income and quadros. And we'll talk a little bit about that further down the line here. Oops, sorry guys. So what really makes a successful divorce? It's when you are able to tie in these 4 pieces of this divorce puzzle and help the borrowers, help the divorcing couple walk away and feel whole again, or be working towards feeling whole again. It's a process. I speak with a lot of mortgage and real estate professionals and even family law professionals. And the one thing they often say to me is, what's the difference in the process? In the real estate process, it's quite similar. You have your contract, you submit an offer, you get an accepted offer, you do your due diligence, you have inspections. All of that stuff, and then you go to the closing table and you sign the papers. And the mortgage process is very similar. Application, collect documents, we go through processing, underwriting, all of that fun stuff. And then we fund the loan at the end. It's all of the gray stuff around the outside, which is the difference, which you need to be aware about in the process. What does the gray matter look like? This is what the gray matter looks like. These are the things that we need to consider in the process. As a mortgage professional, these are the things that we need to consider. And you as real estate professional also need to have a basic understanding of some of these pieces in order to effectively guide your clients. You guys have a fiduciary responsibility, whether it's a listing agreement or a buying agreement, in a specialty area such as divorce. You need a basic understanding of the process. And these are some of the things that it's important to know about. Any questions?
Let's give the RO.
QDRO is a qualified domestic relations order. It's a court order, an assignment of funds possibly. So we're gonna go, we won't that way, but I'll talk about how you guys can learn more about that in the future.
So let's say the property is just in one of the spouses,
Yep,
but they're getting the divorce.
Yep.
How did that,
can I table that and talk a little bit later? We're gonna go in detail about that. Okay. So a little background knowledge that I'm gonna educate you guys on here. Types of property, if a couple's going through divorce, some of the initial items that they're gonna talk about is what they own, their property, what it's worth, and how it's going to be divided. It's important to know the difference between separate and marital property, also known as marital and non-marital property, and the distinction between the two. We're going to talk in more detail about that. After answering these questions, the couple answer these questions, and depending on what state that they live in, but here in Connecticut, we're an equitable distribution state, meaning all marital property in a divorce situation is going to get divided equally if the parties wish that to be so. But as far as the state is concerned, all the property needs to be identified as marital or non-marital or separate versus marital property. Non-marital and separate are the same thing. Okay. Let's take a closer look at the difference between the two. So separate property is what you bring into a marriage, potentially what you received as a gift during the marriage, what you inherited during the marriage. In order for it to maintain its separate status, it needs to be kept separate. Once you commingle the property with your marriage, then it doesn't necessarily maintain its separate status.
how do you keep it separate?
Just an example.
What about secondary residences? So like what if you're primary and then he owns another house and you own another?
Purchased before the marriage or after the marriage? During the marriage, then it's marital property. Yep. Your question was, how do you keep it separate?
You're separate, yeah.
You need to own it prior to the marriage. You need to pay it out of separate bank accounts that are not marital bank accounts. But some of that property may be marital. We'll talk about that in 1 second. I like the question though. Property that is marital properties, all property acquired during the marriage, and in some cases, the increase in value, this is what I'm talking about as far as the separate property, the increase in value of separate property is considered marital property. For instance, I go into a marriage with a savings account that has $1,000. During the marriage, its increase in value is roughly $100. That $100 becomes marital property or a marital asset. It needs to be divided. You own a property. it's separate property, you get married, that increase in value in that separate property could be considered a marital asset. So the value needs to be considered to be divided. Okay,
What if you purchased the property, but like I said, but you only put it in one spouse's name? Is that considered marital property?
you purchased the property during the marriage,
Yes, but
it is considered marital property.
even if it's only in one name,
All property acquired during the marriage,
Regardless of.
regardless of whose name is on it.
okay.
Yep, and who lives there. Yep,
What if it's in an LLC,
who's the owner of the LLC?
one spouse? What if one spouse owned, had the LLC, had property, sold that property, bought different property through the LLC?
So
One spouse owns it.
it's a business. So that business asset is going to be something that is pulled into consideration. It depends. It depends on where the fund, what funds were used during the property was, who's on those accounts. Ultimately, I'm gonna say this, and I'm gonna say it at the end too. It's important that in these decisions, as real estate professionals and mortgage professionals, you advise your clients to seek the advice of counsel. I don't give legal advice. Neither should you.
So will we, like, let's say we have people who are like, oh, I'm gonna get my first investment property. Then that would be a time that we would advise them to go talk to someone, because that later on, that
Yes.
investment property could end up in.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And Mark, there's a question in the chat about whether you're an attorney.
I'm not an attorney. I'm an associate, a member of the New Haven County Bar Association. And I'm a member of the International Association of Collaborative Professionals and the Connecticut Council for Non-Adversarial Divorce. I'm trained in mediation and I'm trained in collaborative law, but I am not an attorney. I merely did these things and I'm doing these things to get a better understanding of the process and how I can be a better representative for my clients. Yep. Protect them. Yep. Okay, so thanks, Rachel. All right, so you guys were talking about the real estate, so thank you for segueing to that. I'm gonna give you an example of an opportunity here for us to advise our clients properly. So in this bullet point right here, Ken and Sally recently got married. They live in Ken's home that he lived in prior to that he owned prior to the marriage. In order to make Sally feel like it was her home and the family home, Ken assigned through a quitclaim deed Sally to title, which I can completely understand. Makes sense, right? But what Ken may or may not have known is that by doing so, he made that a marital asset. And he divided that marital asset with his now spouse. So prior to them doing that, the ownership of the property was separate. Post-marriage, the value increase or decrease in some cases would be considered a marital asset. But what Ken did was, by putting Sally on title, is he gave half of that asset away to his spouse. Now, is it a bad thing for him to do that? Only if they get divorced. Right, exactly. Right. Do you think it's someone's responsibility to let him know what he's doing? Yeah. Right, so, in this case, if it was just a quitclaim that he did in front of the attorney, the attorney that did the process, the quitclaim, should have advised the client. Not for any other reason than so that he was making an educated decision. Okay, oftentimes it's not talked about though. Maybe never talked about. Maybe the attorney assumed that he knew what he was getting into. Maybe he didn't want to have the difficult conversation because it could be a little awkward. Maybe he forgot, whatever the case may be. It's important that Ken is made aware of this situation. And myself as a mortgage professional doing refinances like crazy over the last 2 years, definitely ran into this situation. It was a separate property, someone was refinancing, they were putting their spouse on to qualify, or they were just putting the spouse on title, just because. It's my responsibility to let them know the potential consequences, so they understand that process. I've never had anybody say, oh, I don't want to do it.
Well, no, because if she's expecting it, now you're back out. Now it's all-
Right? Yeah. So quick little knowledge check. All property acquired during the marriage is known as,
Separate property or man.
property acquired during the marriage is known as? Nice. In many jurisdictions, the increase in value of separate property may be considered. Nice, good job. All right. Any questions, comments, concerns? That light is really bright.
I had a client, I did mortgages for years,
Yeah,
and, I had a client getting divorces, I had 4 of them. And one of them wanted to buy another piece of property before the closing.
yeah,
And he said, are you divorced yet? I'm like, no, I said, so you want them to own it? What? I said, well, are you gonna give it away to them? What are
yeah,
you doing?
yeah.
They're like, huh? And I said, yeah, you need to talk to your attorney.
perfect. Handled it perfectly. Yeah, we're gonna talk about that. So, did you guys all hear that story? Yeah, that's a real thing. So we're gonna get into some real estate practices and specifics. Rach, we good? Oh, no, the light from the camera is like, I need sunglasses. I need Latoya sunglasses. They're gonna talk about some real estate specific issues. We're gonna get into the nitty gritty here. Talk about getting the listing. And this was a national presentation originally, so in some states you have the option of representing the clients in a different type of agency than we do here in Connecticut. So just kind of omit that. Representing divorcing sellers, should a real estate agent disclose divorce in a home sale? Representing divorcing buyers, avoiding malpractice, and then some safeguards for you guys. So who is the client? If a divorcing couple comes to you and says they want to sell the house, and they're both on title and they're both on mortgage, who's your client? Both of them, right? Aside from that, if somebody comes to you, and Latoya brought this up a little while ago, he or she's on title, only he or she is on the mortgage. We know that it's not a marital asset. Who's your client? Both or one? Correct. In a divorce situation, back to the couple that wants to sell the house, if they come to you, you know that they're in a divorce, they don't trust each other probably. They're arguing all the time. But now you have this couple that you're representing. They say they want to sell the house, but do they really want to sell the house? She lives in the house. She's taking care of the kids. She doesn't have a job, potentially. He's out working. He's the breadwinner, paying all the bills. Who's motivated to sell the house? He is, right? You're going to run into a situation potentially where she may obstruct the sale. I was talking to a fellow real estate agent this past week as I was getting ready for this presentation, and she told me she was in a situation that one of the spouses dumped a bunch of trash in the kitchen before a showing. So you can run into some real problems when you're representing a couple who has equal ownership in the property. You have two masters. You have two people that you're beholden to in this process, and it can make the process very difficult. Wouldn't you imagine? Now imagine that both clients come to you during this process and they want you to represent them in a buying situation. How difficult might that situation be? Maybe looking in similar price points, looking at the same houses. In today's market, when there's so few houses on the market, you could have the same couple looking at the same house, bidding on the same house. That could create kind of a conflict, I would imagine, for you guys. So you need to be aware and you need to ask yourself the hard question, do I want to represent these clients? What protections do I need to put in place? Speak to your broker, speak to attorney friends. I'm sure you all have attorney real estate friends. Get advice, seek, the more seasoned agents in your brokerage, seek their advice. You have a fiduciary responsibility to both borrowers in this situation. We touched on that really quickly. We touched on access to the residence. If one spouse is blocking access, canceling showings, taking the lockbox off the door, destroying the property, making it very difficult for you to sell the house. Now, we all understand we have a job. We want to sell the house. We want to make money, right? If you have a listing agreement, that's a legal document. You also have this court rule, the rule number 24, rules of civil procedure. The intervention rule allows you guys to attach yourself and to intervene in the divorce. Your brokerage can file this document. Let's say you have that spouse that just won't get out of your way. The brokerage can file the document, petition the court to get involved, and compel this party that's obstructing you to be, to get out of the way. And if they violate this court order, then they can be held in contempt of court and suffer fines or imprisonment, whatever the case may be. So you guys have the option of doing that if you're having a problem with a divorcing couple. Okay, you're intervening with the divorce, you're getting involved, you're becoming a representative of the court.
Won't that make it worse?
No, well, I guess potentially it could,
Gonna hate.
or that can put them in line and say, okay, I agreed to sell the house, or we've decided to sell the house. I need to step in line. I mean, it's a difficult process. I recently went through a collaborative training, collaborative law training, and they put us on a lot of role plays where I was a spouse, I was the male spouse or the female spouse, and we did a lot of role interactions. And one of the interaction was this woman was a stay-at-home mom. She had 2 kids. One was a special needs kid. She hadn't worked in years, but she was a trained teacher, I think it was. And this woman was faced with getting back into the workforce, having to get retrained, go back to school, start earning money. And it's heavy stuff. This was a role play that I was in. And after 20 minutes, 30 minutes, you felt like you were in that situation. When people are going through divorce, how many people have been through divorce? You do some crazy shit. You're just not yourself a lot of times. So to be making these decisions and for you guys to be kind of managing the couple and helping them make the decisions, it's a difficult process. And you need to kind of be aware of it and learn how to manage it, so to speak.
Has anybody run into, excuse me,
Yeah, no, it's fine.
has anybody run into a situation where the couple, they come to you because they're about to go through the divorce or they already started the process, they want to sell the house
Mhm.
ahead of letting the court deal with it. But then they don't like the numbers that they're gonna end up with after the sale and everything they have to pay. And after, they tell you sign a listing agreement, then they change their mind. Has anybody run into something like that? Because I was definitely had last year. It was like,
You're dealing with a lot of emotions.
what do you do in this situation? Do you just okay, all right, just
Give them the facts and wait 3
Yep.
days, then
Yep.
they can pay.
And I would make them go speak to an attorney before you list their house. That's just doing it way in ahead of time.
I think talking to a mortgage person. And
And
sometimes they make that decision, they don't even know how much money they're gonna have to
Yep.
get to that place.
Yep.
And so it's like, they might have saw the numbers, like, oh, that's not gonna be enough for me to continue my lifestyle, whatever. So if they had spoken to a mortgage person, they probably could have made a better decision.
If they've already started the divorce process, there's a likelihood that they won't be able to sell the property.
if they already started.
If they started the divorce process, and there hasn't been any decisions made, you know, through mediation or collaborative process or anything like that, they can't sell the property. Yeah,
Until the divorce is finalized?
or until an agreement is put in place, allowing them to sell it. A temporary agreement potentially.
So what's the first step they should do? We can't list it.
You could list it. If they're not divorced, if they're not in the process of getting a divorce,
So we're
they're
selling
just
their house
talking about
before
it.
They're going to divorce.
That's what she.
It's certainly complicated and complicated in the sense that they couldn't make a decision, complicated. Right? They made a decision, they changed it 2 days later.
I'm
I mean,
pretty sure one of them probably couldn't qualify for whatever they thought it was. They
potentially,
needed for their lifestyle.
Yeah.
That's what the issue is. One person is gonna have more than the other. It's not gonna be even. Because one person's income is different than the other, and one person's circumstances, so.
possibly.
And that's what we're looking for. They still have another property. But I wanted to sell that property also. and it was like, no.
And they will not bust the house, they will say.
Yep. Yep.
And they're both willing to sign a listing agreement. I don't think there's any issue. Yeah, because. They're gonna talk to the attorney afterward or before. In the case I had, they talked to the attorney before.
Yep.
And the divorce attorney on the handle and real estate.
Okay.
So.
Yeah.
But they were, both willing to sign the listing agreement,
Okay.
so I represented both.
Yeah. So that's perfect.
Yeah.
Right. If they agree to it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If it's marital property and only one person's on title and mortgage. And that one person comes to one of you to sell their house and there's a divorce going on. Don't get involved in that.
What if there's not an actual divorce going on, that person still comes to you, wants to sell property? Or will you be reliable if?
Not if there's not if you can prove that there's not a divorce going on.
And it's separate, not
Yeah.
married.
Right.
But if it is marital. And that person does sell the property without the, could you say other person's permission, because they're not even on the scale.
As long as there's no divorce in place. Once a divorce is filed, and I'm jumping ahead here, but it feels appropriate right now. Once a divorce is filed, you file the paperwork with the court, automatic temporary restraining orders go into place.
Okay.
Automatically. Whether the clerks entered it into the system or not, the intent was there. All the marital property cannot be sold. You can't buy, and you can't encumber the property. I mean, you can't take a loan out against the property. Okay, now ATROs, ATROs as they're called, can be modified during the process. So if they agree to sell the house during the divorce process, and there's court record of it filed with the court, then you can list the property and then you go through the sale and so on and so forth. But once a divorce is filed, Latoya, if you and I are married, we decide we're getting a divorce, we file the paperwork with the court, any marital property that we have together.
But I think you need like one of them is being sneaky, right?
Yeah, like, so say we're married,
Yeah.
we're talking about divorce, we didn't go ahead and file it yet, and I was decide to go ahead and sell this house before that even know. Can you then come back after me for that money for that sell of the house? What the
Yeah.
hell works?
That's it's still a marital asset.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that house that you sold. No, not a, no,
You sold it and you.
Yeah.
There's no knowledge and there's no more, divorce proceedings.
under normal circumstances, a married person can buy or sell real estate without a problem. If there's no divorce in place, you're just selling it to get ahead of it or whatever the case may be. You still have that money that's now in your account. That you sold the house for. That's a marital asset.
Same thing with the rental properties, right? One person could have had a bunch of rental properties. They realized they don't want to have to divide them into divorce and they start selling them all before.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what?
Right, that's a problem too. We good? Hold on a sec. Transaction, I'm reading Teresa's thing here. I was involved in a transaction where the husband did receive future assets. The wife would receive from a waterfront house once the mother-in-law died. Your thoughts? I was involved in a transaction. Teresa, in that situation, that must have been, I can't say specifically, my thoughts on that. That must have been some situation where the mother-in-law left that property to the marriage, and that's why, the husband was entitled to some of that money from the waterfront property.
You know what? I'm Teresa. I just want to tell you what happened. They said I was in court to testify to value. The
Okay.
judge said because the husband had always been doing all the work on the property, and the wife was, and the mother-in-law was very ill, that he
Mhm.
should be able to get some money from that property when she died, because her death was imminent.
Okay. So it was probably thank you, Teresa.
Thank you.
It was probably a case, so if they were married, they valued that asset from during the time that they were married, and he received a portion of that equity for the sweat equity that he put in there. So fair enough. They commingled that asset because he was there doing work and put himself on that property. So. All right, some ways that you guys need to protect yourselves when you're representing a divorcing couple. That may be a challenge. Remember, you're representing two folks there, I want to say two masters, but I don't know if that's appropriate. I apologize. It's important that you give the same advice to both parties. Can't be giving advice to one party that's different than the other. You're gonna get yourself in trouble, for sure there. Stay out of arguments, and this is a big one. If you find yourself in a situation where you're at a house or wherever you are and you find yourself in the middle of an argument, suggest to take a break, everybody split up, go have a cup of coffee, smoke a cigarette, do whatever, and then reconvene and see if you can move the meeting forward again. Or I would even suggest if you don't see any way out of it, end it and reschedule it for another time. You don't want to get yourselves in the middle of that situation. Okay. Document all communication. If you have a phone call or a meeting with one spouse, let them know that you're going to summarize the meeting and you're going to send an email out to both parties. And you want to keep records of all communication. Okay. You need to be able to demonstrate that you gave the same advice to both sides, because, if something goes awry, one party could potentially, say that you were favoring one spouse over the other, and you need to be able to demonstrate that you were acting.
Group text, everything.
Yeah.
Group text.
Yep, document everything. And don't hesitate to terminate the listing contract if matters get progressively worse. We all know how difficult real estate is at times. Every client's different. And there are clients that you hate and clients that you love and situations that you wish you weren't a part of. There are some responsibilities that you have with a divorcing couple that could really go south quickly. So you want to, again, seek the advice of your broker and your fellow agents and an attorney if you're in a situation that you're uncomfortable with, and consider maybe terminating the contract if it's not working out for you. Any questions?
When I listed a property, and I said at the very beginning, I understand you're both family divorced.
Yep.
And when you guys start talking personal, I'm gonna say, this sounds like a personal problem, so don't take it personal.
Yeah.
Take it factual, that we need to get back to just the sale,
Yep.
and you guys need to solve your own personal problems. And so that stopped it,
Yeah.
we didn't have any issues.
Good. Yeah. Call them out for sure. What are your thoughts on this question? Should a real estate agent disclose divorce on a home sale?
Only the divorcing couple agrees to it, right?
Okay,
But it's still not a good thing to do, I'm sure you take advantage of that situation.
potentially you could.
Only if they ask. You're supposed to protect them.
Yeah. Those are all good answers and they all have valid reasons. Ultimately, the divorce should be kept confidential. Without a doubt. I do suggest, as Kayla said, that if you're representing divorcing sellers, ask them, if I am asked by another agent, if this is a divorce situation, do I have permission to disclose that? And I'll give you an example why that might be a good thing to do that. Personal information about the seller does not relate to the marital value of the home and must be kept private. I think Antonella, you mentioned that. The fact that the sellers are going through divorce is one which should not be disclosed, and the listing agent is prohibited from disclosing what the motivating factors are for the parties selling the property. Divorce has no bearing on the value of the home. In addition, disclosing the divorce could be a breach of fiduciary responsibilities to the sellers. It would suggest to any buyer that the sellers may have a motive for accepting a lower offer. However, a listing agent who fails to disclose information about the other party, which could constitute fraud or dishonest dealing, could be subject to liability. While the buyer may later complain that the broker did not disclose the seller's divorce, on balance, it's safer not to disclose. There is one instance, and I'll have an example a little bit later on, where you might want to disclose the fact that it's a divorce situation and you've done your due diligence. If you haven't done your due diligence, and there are plenty of agents out there who won't know the answer to this question, you may be put in a situation where you could face some liability. Representing buyers is very different than representing sellers. Unless, of course, you're representing the same couple and they're fighting over the same property. You need to be cautious. And one of you mentioned it earlier, if you're representing buyers and you know that they're in the divorce process or going through a divorce, you need to know what stage of the divorce that they're in. Somebody had mentioned the fact that if you purchase a home while a buyer is going through divorce, that property could potentially become a marital asset. And in some cases required to be sold and the equity divided, or that other spouse be made whole from that purchase. If a divorce, oftentimes, you know, especially if they're using marital assets to purchase the home, right? So here's a pretty good example. A client, a friend of mine, represented on a mortgage sale in Colorado, was in the process of purchasing a new home. And selling the home she had purchased 3 years prior while she was separated from her husband. The reason that she was buying a home and selling a home is because the husband was awarded 50% of that property that she had purchased 3 years ago because they were still legally married, but separated. And the values in that area, in the Denver area, had increased substantially, and there was a lot of money in equity in that property. So she had to sell that home that she bought 3 years ago. She lost 50% of its equity, and then she had to buy a home 3 years later that had increased in value. Because the agent in the divorce didn't ask about the divorce process and what stage in the divorce process, or the mortgage professional, if there was a mortgage going on. There's a question on, are you married, separated, or unmarried? As a mortgage professional, I should have asked that question, or should have made them aware, or should have asked, do you have permission to purchase a home? Do you understand that if you buy a home, it could potentially be? Have you sought the advice of your attorney, if you're going to be buying a home while you're still technically married? All of these things you need to be aware. Because that could be a huge liability for you. Fiduciary responsibility, again, if you're going to specialize in divorce You need to be aware that there's possibilities. This agent, in my opinion, and the brokerage could have been held liable for that in a huge way. From what I understand, they weren't for whatever reason, but they could have been for sure. Some states have the title companies, the title states, they're called, where the title company won't allow someone to purchase a home while they're still married, or they need to get the signature of the spouse. Again, this is one of those multi-state slides that I didn't get a chance to get out, sorry. We touched on this earlier when we talked about ATROs. Generally, a married person can buy or sell real estate. If they're not going through divorce, there's no problem. Once the divorce is filed, the automatic temporary restraining orders go into place and stop the sale. I had this case a month ago. I was helping this is kind of a weird situation. I was helping a gentleman and his new fiance purchase a home while he was just getting ready to finalize his divorce. His ex-wife was getting their marital home. He was getting a chunk of money. When I sent the file to the underwriter, they run this software in the background, it's called Fraud Guard, and all this crazy shit pops up. And there was a lien on their marital home of the ex-spouse because of the divorce, because of the automatic temporary restraining order that's put in place when it's filed with the court. A lis pendens or a lien is put on the property to notify us in these situations that there's something awry there. We couldn't close this loan until that divorce was final, until I had to sign divorce decree. The system worked in this case. However, again, if the paperwork was filed and the intent was there, but the clerk didn't file it at the same time that my underwriter ran the fraud guard, it may not have alerted us. I knew he was going through the divorce process. I knew what to expect. I was prepared for it, and we're able to get around it. So it typically takes about 45 days for a lis pendens to be, taken off a property if there's a temporary restraining order on it. So we talked about the ATROs a bit. You can modify an ATRO during the process. If the parties agree to sell the property or agree to let one party buy a property, oftentimes the parties separate during the divorce. Maybe somebody doesn't want to go rent, they want to go buy a property. Agreements can be put in place to say, okay, you can purchase a property. I'm not going to have any claim of ownership to that property, even though it could be considered a marital asset. Okay, it's important that you're asking the questions as the buyer agent and you understand the divorce process. This is important. If you purchase a home with a client and you haven't asked the proper questions, the court could potentially have you sell the property. And you can be sued for malpractice. And involuntarily, you become part of the case. It's called the joinder rule. It's another one of these federal rules that attaches you to a case if you're being sued for malpractice. So malpractice is a dereliction of professional duty or a failure to exercise, ordinary degree of professional skill or learning by one rendering professional service which results in injury or loss or damage. It's not just malpractice is not just for medical professionals or attorneys. It also applies to our licenses as well. And this is like the real estate kind of code here. Federal 19. The joinder rule, if you are sued for civil conspiracy because you went out and mistakenly helped a client buy or sell a property and you're being sued by the other party, you're now joined to the divorce, you have to get a lawyer, you're gonna incur legal bills, so on and so forth. So. We talked about this intervention rule prior to when that client was being difficult and you had to intervene and seek the advice of the court. Also, there are cases where a broker or an agent might want to intervene because maybe the clients are being deceitful or dishonest and want to hold back a commission or do something in that regard. So you're not getting paid. You might want to use this rule to intervene in the court case and petition the court on your behalf. Okay, quick little knowledge check here. When real property is sold while ATROs are in effect, the agent may be, what's the answer here?
What?
Sorry?
Shoot.
It's all, it's all,
The trick question.
yeah. So back to our question. Should divorce be disclosed when selling or even protecting buyers when you think of property? No.
Is there a document that we can get from the attorney? I think they say they're going through divorce. I need something from your attorney saying that you're allowed to sell this, that it's okay.
Yep.
It's in public records
Okay.
too.
A divorce is in public
It's
record.
in the Connecticut State website.
Yep.
Like, you can
Yep.
go, you have their names and their time, you can go pull a case.
Absolutely, you can ask for some sort of documentation.
It's easy to actually find it online.
Yeah, but are we crossing the line?
Yeah, I would be the attorney.
No.
Just.
You're not, you can go the,
It's like a consultation. If somebody reached out to me and was like, no, it's.
you
fine."
can go through the court judicial website and get,
Yeah, I would check.
that you can see the court filing. However, I do want to say this, and I learned this during the mediation process. Oftentimes, when a couple is meeting with the mediator, they won't file for divorce right away. They won't file till the agreement has been set in place. So if you hear divorce, you need to start asking questions.
Or mediator,
What's that?
or mediator.
Or separated.
Yeah. Yeah, just need to start asking questions. Am I missing anything? No.
So like if you're a buyer.
Yep.
That's married, or she's married, and they're like, "Okay, I don't feel like going through the paperwork, because you know, cheaper to keep her. Right? But if I have a buyer and they're going to get a townhouse, wherever, I need to let them know that you're technically still married, even though you live your own lives.
Yeah,
And if anything goes down, you might have to sell it.
yeah, I mean, this could potentially be marital property. You should seek the advice of an attorney. I'm not a attorney, I'm not a legal professional. You should seek the advice just to make sure you make the right decision. Yeah,
So as a mortgage broker.
I'm not a broker, but yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
lender, when they're coming to you, and they're saying, well, we need to get separated. Or we're getting divorced,
Mhm.
how soon do you start the refile, assumable, or whatever they're gonna do process? We wait until they're almost done, we do it at the beginning, so they can know what they're buying.
I don't start, it's hard to say. It's different in different situations. For instance. If it's a woman that comes to me, she's a stay-at-home mom, she's going through divorce, she's gonna be getting money from her spouse, whether it be alimony, child support. It could be a lump sum distribution, maybe she's receiving several $100,000. I won't start the application process early. And the reason being is because the verbiage in the settlement agreement needs to be specific. And one of the tools that we use to create an income stream is a trust. The verbiage needs to be in the settlement agreement prior to the application date in my system, or else it could be considered a different type of income. So I will work with the attorneys or the mediators or the collaborative professionals to help them structure the verbiage correctly. Once I know that that income stream is gonna be the way it is, then I can start the process. So it depends. Not to escape that. We good? Any questions? No? Okay. So to get back to this situation here. If you walk into a house and you suspect that this house that you're going into with your client, your buyer client, is being sold because of a divorce, and you go up to that agent and you say, this looks like a divorce situation to me, your client's getting divorced. And you say to me, I'm not at liberty to say. Which is a pretty good answer, right? You might want to reframe the question and say, well, if this is a divorce situation, do your clients have permission to sell the property? Because if that agent hasn't done their due diligence and doesn't have the permission of the court to sell that property, and your client goes and puts an offer on it, and you're under contract, they spend money on an inspection, they spend money on an appraisal, they spend all this money doing all this stuff, and all of a sudden it's found out that they can't sell the house. Is there some potentially some liability there? Right, potentially, right? As the listing agent in that situation, you probably did your colleague a solid by letting them know that maybe you want to check this out. If they're not aware of, if they don't know the answer to that question, that's a problem.
Our buyers already did all that research, because that's what they do all the time. You Google everybody. Oh, Google's, yeah. They know their firstborn, everything.
But what do you say, say you are the listing agent, you are a divorced couple.
Yep.
But you also the buyer, and your buyer asks you these questions, like, oh, is this couple divorced?
Who's your first responsibility? What? The seller. Yep. So, I mean, that's a problem, right? I think then you want to maybe. What's a designated agency or something like that?
I mean, you always say if they have permission to sell.
Yeah. Yes,
If
they
you've
have
done your
permission.
due
to sell.
diligence and you're representing the
Yep.
sellers, you know they have permission to
Yeah.
sell. That answers the question. They have permission to sell.
Yep,
You have to get that in writing.
I suggest you do.
Your broker probably wants you to do.
As a listing agent, I would suggest you absolutely have that permission in
Yeah,
there,
but in divorce, I think it's all house.
that they can sell it.
Yeah,
Yep,
I don't think a lot of people do that.
do what? Ask for
Do that.
permission?
I'd be upset later on.
To make sure that they're going through the divorce.
After this class.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, if more people took this class, we have a lot of realtors out there.
wow.
You know, sometimes you don't know what you don't know.
So maybe we should start Googling like our clients.
Yeah.
So 3 important questions that you're gonna wanna ask. Is the property involved in a divorce case? Do you have the court's permission to sell? Can I have a copy of the orders that says we can sell this property?
But you also have permission from the seller to do that, I mean, right?
To share that
Share
information?
that,
Yes,
yes.
absolutely. That's why I said in the beginning, consider asking your sellers, do I have permission to share this information if I am asked a question?
And if they say no. Do you need that, you probably need that in writing, that they said no.
I mean,
You know, I was asking what you want to say.
But the other thing is, if they've already gone through the process, it is a factual thing, so if the buyer's agent goes and looks it up. We're gonna
Potentially,
find it.
yeah.
Potentially.
Can you use time of the essence of that?
That way you're not in trouble. Public information. on the
Yeah,
right
it's
website.
time of the essence, of closing, the closing date that has time of essence to whatever.
potentially, yeah, absolutely. All right, moving along. Avoiding the unlawful practice of law, we touched on this, and it's very important for my businesses as well as yours. Once you start advising your clients, you should do this, you should not do this, then you're potentially crossing that line of giving legal advice. Okay, you need to be aware of of the words that you're using and how directed you're being. Most important term. Seek the advice of your attorney. You know, even if you know the proper legal answer, encourage them to seek the advice of their attorney. It keeps you out of trouble. Because they can go back and say, well, you know, so-and-so told me I should be doing this. And it could have been the wrong advice. And they may try to sue you for it. So protect your license. That's the completion of the real estate portion. I'm just gonna talk a little bit on the CDLP and what we offer and what we can offer to your divorcing clients. I'm a mortgage loan originator, just like the mortgage loan originators that you all use. But as I said earlier, I'm trained in specifics related to divorce, in how we calculate income, in how debts are assigned, in the particulars about alimony and child support and what we can do with that in order to help a client qualify. How many months of child support and receipt do you need to have for what type of loan, so on and so forth. We study these, we learn about them on an ongoing basis. The process of divorce mortgage planning, this is what we take each client through. And we collect information and share it with the divorce team. So that as a collective, we can make the best decisions for the clients. I respect all of the mortgage professionals in our area a tremendous amount. Most of them don't know the particulars of the divorce process. Of no fault of their own, it's just not something they've spent time learning about. Oh, sorry about that. That's a miss. I'm going to give you the answer to this one. You can't think traditionally when dealing with a divorce situation. It doesn't work out. You're not serving your clients to the best of your ability if you think traditionally, and that's what we do differently than those other professionals. So please, if you have divorcing clients, I would love to work with them and obviously work with you guys. That's all I got.
I like the fact that you have the experience as well as now the desire, the knowledge.
Experience because I'm divorced. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. So, I mean, I have this for you guys, a little flyer here, and for those of you online, I'll send it to you via email. It's a coupon for all intents and purposes for a free appraisal for any divorcing clients that you guys have and want to send my way. So, here, any questions? Concerns, criticisms?
Regular consultation.
What?
Regular consultation.
Consultations are always free. Okay, just like, and I had this conversation, I met with a divorce financial analyst this morning and showed her the presentations that I do for divorcing clients. And she's like, well, what's your hourly rate? Because they get hourly rates for everything. Like they get money for the minute that they spend on a client. I'm like, it's free. It's called disparate treatment. I can't treat my real estate clients different than I treat my divorcing clients. So all of the time that I spend with the divorcing clients, and it could be months in years, it's all for free until I do a loan. So. She did. She's like, there's gotta be something we can do to get you a fee. Like, I wish there was, but. Yeah, I mean, she does, but I can't collect money for it. So, free appraisal.
What's the appraisal?
What's the appraisal? Appraisal is on a property, right?
Okay. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Appraisal of the value of the property.
Yeah, the value of the property. Yes, absolutely.
We're not doing it way out.
No, right. My bad.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah,
That's the conversation.
What's that? This coupon is for a free appraisal for a client. If you send me a client and there's an appraisal done on a property, this entitles them to one free appraisal,
You're gonna put FHA.
even if it's FHA. Yep.
Nice little script that we can use for our advertising.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's
So for each
500.
client or just one?
just one. Yeah, it's 550, by 50 times 30, that's a lot of money.
Every client I send you? No.
Yes. Yes. And if you give them this coupon, that would be great. Did everybody put a card in their little paper bag back there? No? Okay. You have it. Give it up.
I'll tell you that.
Thank you. I have a couple giveaways for you guys. Yes,
Is that your appraisal for each?
it's one free appraisal, so if you have a client and you send,
Represent. Any sale.
Yep.
It would be.
Not any folks get a free appraisal.
one client,
Turn the chicken salad bag.
Yeah, I see.
yeah.
Wait, was this card going in this bag?
Let me know, we'll figure it out. All right, who wants to pick a card? Pick a card. We got it. Let's cross out, this is Erica.
Thank you.
Well,